Welcome back to the fifth video of Let's Go with Turso series. I am Meet, and in this video we will be seeing how we can use Goose along with LibSQL database in a Golang application. So what Goose is, it is a tool. It is a tool for managing migrations. So let's say you have a database, and as a developer you will never have a time where you have a fixed set of tables and fixed set of columns. There will always be a change in some of the other tables, some or the other tables or columns. So to do that, Goose helps us in creating a things called as migrations, and migrations are like a little commit or a specific change in that schema of the database, specific changes to the tables or columns. So what Goose allows us to do is it helps us in moving to a specific change or rolling back to the specific change. So let's get started. First, we will need to install Goose, which is a CLI, and you can head over to the GitHub or the documentation to install this CLI. It is pretty straightforward. You can install it with go install uh, or any specific operating system, like for Brew for macOS or a pre-built binary for Windows. Or you can also install it with it from source. So you can use go build to build it from source. There are a few options which are quite handy. Exclude certain database drivers, so it helps us in reducing the size of the binary itself, and also helps us in removing the unnecessary stuff that we don't require for this for any specific application that we are building. So once that is installed, we can type in Goose to list all the commands that are available with this tool, and to check that installation was correct, we can type in Goose dash version to see if that was correctly installed in the system. Once that is done, we can now create a folder called migrations, which will store all the SQL files or SQL queries to sort of bring that schema into existence. And those will have up and down statements in each file so that a specific change will reflect on the database schema itself. So let's create a let's create our first migration, which will we can type it with Goose. We can specify the directory in which we want to create that migration file, which will be a SQL file, and we can use the create command that will create the SQL file. It won't create a SQL query for us. We'll just want to create the template for how Goose manages the migrations. So we can type in create and the name for that migration, which will be a user friendly or developer friendly name for this migration. And type in SQL to specify the Goose command that it is a SQL migration. So once that is done, it will create a SQL file with a specific template that is goes up in some statement beginning and statement end and goes down, right? So we'll explore that in the editor, and once we can once we have in the editor, and you can see that there are two sections, the goes up and the goes down. Each of them have each one of them can have one or multiple queries. Like you can see the statement beginning and statement end. So this can have multiple statements. So for instance, let's say we can create a users table here with certain fields, and so this goes up section will have create table of users, and the goes down will do the opposite of what we have done in this up section. So let's say we created a users table, we simply need to drop that table in the down section. So what the general idea of this is to create a change in the database schema and to roll back the change in the database schema with up and down section respectively. So once we have specified the goes up and down queries, we can now start to explore what actual goes up and goes down command is. We need to start the server for SQL in order to connect to that database. So we type in Goose, the database driver's name, and the database string that will be the localhost 8080 in this case. It could be any other string on the cloud as well. So we specify the localhost 8080 and we try to fetch the status of it, which you can see there are no migrations file found here. What this states is that there is we didn't specify the migration to dir, right? So we need to specify the whose migration to dir, which we can specify it from the dash dir option or from the environmental variables as well. So we specify the dir, which is the migrations in which the migration file was created, and we can specify the torso and the driver name and the DB string. Then we can type the status, which will we can see that there is a one migration, but it is in the pending state. So that is how you get the idea of what the migrations are for that database specifically. So now let's let's start a DB shell for this Turtle database, and you can see that there is this Goose DB version created. This is some internal stuff, internal table that is created from Goose and not from any application which we created. So once that is created, we can type in Goose up to create that, apply that migration into the database, and you can see that it has created the users table. So if we type in status, you can see that that migration has now been applied, which was earlier in the pending state. So once we have applied a migration, we can also downgrade or roll back to a migration, and you can see that once that is applied, that users table is deleted, or we can say that the users table was dropped from the database after the down command. So you can see that the command was quite big, right? Like we need to specify the DB driver name, the uh, the directory for that migration, and also the DB string. So we have environmental variables like Goose migration dir, which will specify where the folder migration files reside in, the path to that folder, and the Goose driver, in which in this case it is also it could be Postgres, SQL, SQLite, MySQL, any of those drivers that you are preferring. But in this video is focused on the Turso LibSQL database connection. So this driver will be Turso, and the Goose DB string will be localhost 8080 because we are running a local instance of libsql database and not on the cloud Turso instance of that libsql database. Well, we have specified all of those, and we can just type in Goose status that will actually list the connections, list the migrations that are applied or the status of that. So now this becomes really easy to understand. So now let's create one more migration, which we'll call add post table, and it has created a SQL file with just some random number which we'll explore a little while. It is a really important number that we can reference later on. So let's say here as well, we'll need to create a up statement. So in this case, again, it will be to create a post table with certain fields like ID as a primary key, then title as a text, not null. You can add constraints, the body which will be text again and not null, user ID. This will reference it from as a foreign key to the user's table with the ID as the key that we want to reference in the user's table. And similarly, in the down section, we can drop this table if it exists, right? Drop table post, so it will drop that table once we have the down command. So now you can, if you type in the status, you can see that there are two migrations for this database. And if you type in goes up by one, it will only apply the first migration. And you can again type in goes up by one, it will type the second migration. And goes down will go down by one by default, but goes up will go to the latest migration in the migrations folder. So that is really important to remember that goes up will go directly to the latest migration, and goes down will go one step at a time to the previous migration. So let's explore one more migration here, so we can have a much better understanding of what migrations are in this Goose, and we will also explore more commands in the Goose CLI. So we'll create a Goose add block table uh, migration, and let's open that file in the editor that the Goose has created, and we will have some things over here that we for sure need to create the block table. So let's create a table if it doesn't exist with the name blog, and we will specify some fields in this as id as integer with the primary key, name being text, and not null as constraint, description as text, not null again as constraint, and author id will be the foreign key referencing the user's id from the users table, as the author id will be the name of id. And in the down section we simply need to drop this table if it exists. The block table will be dropped from this table. And now we will specify one more key change we need to add. So I'll add one more statement here. So this will be to alter the table post. So you can see that there we created a post table, right? And it had users as a foreign key, but now we want to have one block to many post relationship. So we'll alter the post table and to add the column blog ID, which will reference the blog ID from the blog table. So that will be the change for this. The similar change for this will be to alter the table and drop that column that we inserted or we changed in this migration. So there were two step migration, right? So here we first created the blog, then we altered the post table. But first, when we do the down table, we need to first drop that blog ID from that and then drop that blog table because it references in the blog in the post table. So we cannot remove the blog table and then remove the blog table. So that is need to be taken into consideration. So now we have three migrations to be ran, and you can see that there are a few more commands that we can explore. That is up to and down to. So let's explore goes up to. So for up to, we need to specify the migration ID, which will be the number that you see over here. It is generated from Goose CLI itself, but we can also specify our own convention for this specifically. So if you type Goose up to the ID of that migration, you can see it applied it till that migration ID. So there were two migrations applied, and a third migration was not applied in this case because we wanted it to only make changes till that migration. So you can see that users and the post table are created. This is on the order of the table name, so it's not based on that which migration was applied. So now there is one more migration which is pending. So we can simply do a goes down, and we can see that we have two more migrations pending because goes down by one itself, not the entire way down. So now you can see the post table was deleted, which was the last applied migration. And once that is done, we can also roll back to just to explore how exactly goes not goes but actual migrations work in the database schema itself. So once we have no migrations applied, we can explore the goes up by one, which will increment the migration and apply the migration just by one command, one migration at a time. So it will do the first migration itself from the current point, and the second migration, third migration, and so on. But if you try to do it the fourth time, it won't have because it won't run because we already have done the three migration. that we have. So all the migrations are applied. We can only go down and not up in this case. So as you can see, we have three tables. The DB version is not the table for the application. So users, blog, and posts are the tables that we are using in this migrations schema of that database. So once we have explored those things, we can now look into a few more things, a few more commands that we can, few more tricks that we can use here. One is the migration ID. So let's say I want to go down till that migration number, and that becomes a little tricky to remember that ID because it is generated. You can see it is a bit random at the very end. So you need to really copy paste that ID, and that will roll back to that version specific migration specific ID. But let's say I have, so let's say I remove this migrations. Not let's copy that contents. Let's copy the query first. So I'll copy the blogs migrations queries, and I'll remove the migration file from the migrations folder. Uh, so once that is deleted, we can see that there are two migrations folder now, and if we type in Goose status, we can also see that there are indeed two migrations in the in a for that database itself. So now let us say we create a migration with 003 add block table. So once that is created, you can see that it still added the random number, right? Like the long random number in the query name, which we don't want because the 003 is not anymore the migration ID for this uh, command for this migration. So we can't do it this way. What we want, what we typically want is we just want to create the file with the ID and the name of that query. And if we paste it over here, it will still act like a Goose migration file. So now if you see with the Goose status command that there will be three migrations, but there is a issue that it has appeared at the top that it is the first migration to be applied, which is not the case, and it has messed up the order of the migrations which are applied. So you can see that there is an error that migration is running before the current version. So if you type in Goose fix, it will remove all the migrations that are applied. It will not remove all the migrations, but it will sort of change the migrations file with the name that we have after we have manually tweaked that file. But we will run into an issue in the later on stage because it has not reverted those changes back. So let me remove this. Let me rename this file to a little more friendlier way so that it becomes really easy to reference these migrations that we can apply. So this will be the first migration. So this will be the second migration we have already applied for the users. So once that is done, now we if we type in Goose status, we can see the order is still a little haywire. Let's add one more zero there. I missed one zero over there. So let's add one more zero for the last table, and that should be it for this. And we will also need to add it for the users table, two more zeros. So once that is added, we can see that there are three migrations with correct orders, and it is very easy to remember what migration order are in. You cannot you won't need to add that many zeros, but let's say that your application is quite big and it will have thousands of changes. It won't happen, but still, it's better to have those kind of changes there. And if we type in goes up, you can see that there will be error because we have not reverted the changes back from the manual tweaking that we did, which is not a good practice to do. You can either do it the Goose way all the way, or do it you can do it manually all the way. You cannot do it in between of those. That will mess up the migrations ID order, and it is not a good practice to do as well. So I have deleted. So I need to delete the users table, which will be in the uh, database. So let's fix. It won't fix that because there is no issue in the migration ID itself. It is the issue in the database itself. So what I need to do is there are no migration apply. It says that, but so let's get to the DB shell, and if I type in schema, and then that you can see that there is a user table still being applied over there. So I'll simply stop the server and remove the data.sqld, which is the Turso or libSQL's default directory for creating a database, and that will delete the data from the database because the file is deleted. And once that is deleted, we need to start the server again, and this time we will have fresh instance of the database. So if we try to do the status, that will be the as normal as before. But if we try to go up to, let's say, the second migration, it will apply the migrations till the second migration, and it is really easy to see and apply those changes as well. So if you see the schema now for the database, you can see that there are three schemas created for this, which is two of the tables which are from the migration itself. So once that is done, you can see we can type in goes up into go one more migration up, and it will roll back to the genius to that specific point. And once we have applied all the migrations, you can see the status that all the migrations are applied. That is how we work with Goose in Turso LibSQL database. Thank you for watching.